Welcome to a Midwest Minute with Matt. Simple concussion conversations that just make sense. Before we get started, just a quick note. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice and does not replace evaluation or treatment from a qualified healthcare provider. Listening to this podcast does not establish a provider-patient relationship. Every brain injury is unique and what we discuss may not directly apply to your situation. If you are experiencing symptoms or have concerns, please seek care from a licensed medical professional. If this is an emergency, call 911 or your local emergency services immediately. Hello and welcome to another episode of a Midwest Minute with Matt. Simple concussion conversations that just make sense. I am your host, Matt Campbell, and today, episode 13 is titled, Am I Making My Concussion Worse? One of the most common questions I hear from patients is, Am I doing something that's making this worse? Maybe you've had a bad day. Maybe you've exercised. Maybe you had to go to work. Maybe you spent too much time on a screen. Maybe you were around too many people and symptoms increased. And suddenly you're sitting there wondering, did I just cause more problems? Did I just do more damage to my brain at this point in my concussion recovery? Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest fears people have during concussion recovery, and that's that the injury and symptoms aren't necessarily the same thing. And just because symptoms have gotten worse doesn't mean that you've necessarily caused more damage. This question is one of the more common questions that I get during concussion recovery. If my symptoms got worse, it must mean that my brain's gotten worse. And that's understandable for people to think. When you start thinking about symptoms, symptoms are the brain's protection mechanism for itself. When we're doing something that we don't like during concussion recovery, the brain will spike symptoms. The general progression is the first thing that you'll notice is a headache. A headache can kind of stop you in your tracks, but for a lot of times during concussion recovery, they may not be debilitating. They may just be there, or patients will describe them as annoying, but they're not necessarily something that will alter your day-to-day routine. If you're doing something that the brain doesn't like, that you're not listening to the increase in headaches, it will make you dizzy. If you don't listen, it'll make you nauseous. If you don't listen, eventually it will make you throw up. And at the end of the day, if you continue to push, the brain will eventually make you pass out. Now, it's a whole lot harder to get to that point than people realize, but that is the way the brain protects itself. It will slowly start to increase symptoms over time to get you to stop doing something that it doesn't like. At the beginning of concussion recovery, it's being awake. Your brain is trying to control so much of the visual input and the visual processing that if I can get you to close your eyes and lay down and go to sleep, I can heal more effectively and more efficiently. So don't think of symptom increases as the bad guy. They're the protection mechanism that the brain has. Recovery is much more complicated than just my symptoms went up, so I must be getting worse. There's a bigger and deeper relationship that people need to understand during their concussion recovery. People need to understand that relationship is much more complex than just A happens, it must mean B happened. So when we talk about the difference between symptoms and your injury, the nervous system gets overwhelmed or overloaded. The brain can become fatigued. Symptoms go up, but that doesn't mean that you've caused a new injury. Just because symptoms have increased doesn't mean that we've caused more damage or disrupted more neurons during our recovery. Symptoms are important. That feedback component is a big part of concussion recovery, but that doesn't directly correlate to you getting an increase in injury or an increase in damage during your recovery process. Concussion recovery is a fine line between doing too much and not enough. We have to find where that fine line lies. The challenge in this is that fine line is going to move throughout your concussion recovery. So when symptoms go up and down, they are feedback to what you're doing that the brain is either liking or not liking. If you're having a continued day where symptoms are getting worse and worse and worse and worse, that means the brain is trying to tell you that it does not like what's happening and we need to adjust our routine. We need to adjust what we're doing and we need to address the cause of those symptoms going up. It doesn't mean that we're causing more damage, but it does mean that we are delaying our recovery. Symptoms are important, and we need to make sure that we're listening to the symptom increases during your day-to-day routines. Don't just ignore them. You have to continue to build on them and look at what's happening in the background. Fear is a very realistic part of concussion recovery. If you've been listening to the last couple episodes, you understand that fear is a major part in that concussion recovery journey. There are different types of fear that you'll experience during your concussion recovery journey. The fear of the unknown. How am I going to feel when I do this activity? What's going to happen if I go out and see my friends? What's going to happen if these symptoms don't improve? How am I going to feel when I go back to work or be around my friends again? The fear of, will this ever get better? When we start looking at that increase in fear, fear will increase symptoms, symptoms will increase fear. It's a vicious cycle that can be really challenging. When fear goes up, symptoms go up. When symptoms go up, fear goes up. It's something that we have to address, especially early on in concussion recovery, because we need people to understand what's truly going on. I firmly believe if you don't understand what's happening, you won't recover. When it comes to the fear, there's a lot of fear around misunderstanding or not knowing what's actually happening during your own concussion recovery journey. And when fear goes up, it leads to more monitoring of changes. There's more focusing on small changes. All of a sudden, my headache went from a 2 to a 3. What does that mean? What am I doing wrong? Why is this happening? I'm really scared and don't want that to happen again. So we start to focus on the micro of our day to day. As symptoms change, they go up. Now, all of a sudden, I'm worried about that small thing where normally I could continue to function on a day-to-day basis if my headache goes from a 3 to a 4. But now, all of a sudden, that increase in change, now I'm fearful of how bad this is really going to get. The spiral of, at what point am I going to become crashing back down into a symptom spiral? At what point is the progress that I've made going to get worse? Because human nature, the last time I was doing better, I got worse. It's tough to break that change. When there's an increase in fear, we monitor all of the micro changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis. It can even happen if a symptom isn't present. If I've been dizzy for 3 days and now all of a sudden I'm not dizzy anymore, oh, what happened? What's changed? Why is that different? I don't like that that's different. Does that mean there's something worse coming? Because now all of a sudden I'm not floating anymore. Does that mean that the room's going to start spinning and I'm going to start throwing up? The fear of symptoms not being there can be just as challenging as the fear of change of symptoms. When we increase our fear, we monitor more, we worry more, and we start to avoid more things. If I don't know how I'm going to feel, I'm afraid of what's going to happen afterwards, I'm not going. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to avoid doing it because I know that if I do it, it's not going to go well. So why would I go out? Why would I go be with people? Why would I go back to work? Because I know it's not going to go well. So we avoid going to it because we have the fear of what will happen if I do it. Recovery gets harder when there's more fear involved. And I am one that will firmly stand on the soapbox of we have significant amount of fear during concussion recovery because we truly don't understand what symptoms mean. Symptoms are the brain's protection mechanism. They are feedback. They're not the bad guy. They're not great. Don't get me wrong. When we have increase in symptoms, we really would like it to stop. But at the end of the day, they are telling us what the brain does or doesn't like. They are telling us what the brain needs or doesn't need during concussion recovery. So now that you understand what's going on, that symptoms are going up, that the fear is very real during concussion recovery, what do we need to do if symptoms start to go up to avoid feeling like we're causing more damage or to avoid causing a prolonged recovery? The first thing that we need to do is stop. Pause for a second, take a deep breath, step back, relax, and focus on what the symptoms are that are going up and what we're doing. That way we can figure out the feedback that we need. If all of a sudden we feel like things are getting worse or we feel like we're doing more damage to the brain during our recovery, stop, step back, take a break, and then let's reevaluate what we're doing. Ask yourself, what happened? What symptoms went up today? What was I doing when those symptoms went up? What symptoms came on at what time of the activity? Did it all happen at once, or did I have those precursors of I got a little bit worse of a headache and then I got dizzy and then I got nauseous? Did I do something that was new, or did I do something that exceeded what I've been doing? Did I set a timer for an hour and then go work for 2 hours? Or did I do what I normally do every day and something has changed? We need to be able to understand what we did that caused the symptoms to change. And then we can learn from what changes just happened. we can learn from what we were doing and modify that activity to ensure that symptoms don't increase again. Symptoms are not more damage that's occurring to the brain. Increase in symptoms can prolong recovery, but you're not causing more damage to the brain. You're not disrupting more neurons. You're not causing a worse injury. You're just causing a worse recovery. Ultimately, recovery is about listening to your brain, not ignoring your symptoms and continuing to push. Listen to the feedback, modify the activities, and then continue to put one foot in front of the other during your concussion recovery. At the end of the day, confidence comes from understanding what the injury is, why symptoms are going up, and what modifications we need to make for the short term to ensure that symptoms aren't increasing. When people understand why the symptoms fluctuate, they can often avoid a setback because they can monitor their changes, they can go through and modify activities, and they can focus on what the brain is truly trying to tell you. If we don't understand why the symptoms are going up, the fear will go up. Understanding is the true first step to building confidence. And when we understand the injury, that is the first step on your concussion recovery journey. Understanding what's going on reduces fear. When we have support during concussion recovery, that means we generally get a better understanding of what's happening. Symptom increases deserve your attention, they deserve your respect, but they don't deserve your fear and panic. Learning the difference between symptom increases, temporary overload, and causing more damage to the brain can be the key to your concussion recovery. If this episode helps something click for you, share it with somebody who needs it. And if you're looking for more guidance, support, and clarity during your concussion recovery, you can learn more at mwconcussion.com.